The alarms weren't coming from outside the building. They were coming from inside Matthew's communication device, and the sound made Putin's blood run cold. In 40 years of intelligence work, he knew that sound meant only one thing: they had been compromised. She was already moving toward the emergency exit, but Putin grabbed his arm. "Wait." His voice was deadly calm. "If they know we're here, running will only confirm it." Matthews frantically worked his device, streams of data flowing across multiple screens. "They've activated a hunter-killer drone squadron. ETA, 11 minutes. Putin's mind shifted into combat mode. 11 minutes to escape a building they didn't fully know, in a country that wasn't his, with the world's most advanced military technology bearing down on them. But Putin had one advantage the Americans never expected. He pulled out his own device, something that looked like an ordinary smartphone but contained technology even she hadn't seen before. "James, I need you to understand something. I didn't survive the fall of the Soviet Union and 20 years of Russian politics by being unprepared." Putin's fingers moved across the device with practiced precision. Within seconds, every electronic system in the building went dark. Security cameras, communication networks, even the emergency lighting, everything shut down. "What did you do?" she whispered in the sudden darkness. "Something I hoped I'd never have to use," Putin replied. "Every meeting I've attended in the last 5 years, every building I've entered, I've left behind a little insurance policy." In the pitch-black conference room, Putin activated a night vision mode on his device. The green-tinted display showed the building's layout, including several passages that weren't on any official blueprint. And this is where she realized Putin had been planning for this moment all along. "You've been preparing for war with America," she said, not a question but a statement. Putin's smile was invisible in the darkness, but she could hear it in his voice. "I've been preparing for survival. There's a difference." Matthew's device suddenly came back online, but now it was showing different information. Instead of tracking their location, it was broadcasting false signals, creating digital ghosts that would lead the incoming drones to empty buildings across Beijing. "Impressive," Matthews murmured. "Russian military tech has come further than we thought." "That's not Russian military tech," Putin corrected. "That's Putin tech. I learned a long time ago never to trust anyone completely, not even my own government." But they still had less than 10 minutes before the building became a crater. She led them through a maintenance corridor he knew about, but Putin was already 3 steps ahead, using his device to map safe routes and identify potential ambush points. For two men who had spent years as careful rivals, they were working together with surprising efficiency. "The nearest safe house is 12 minutes away," she said as they reached a service elevator. "We're not going to a safe house," Putin replied, pressing a sequence of buttons that overrode the elevator's normal programming. "We're going to win this war." The elevator descended past the basement levels, past floors that officially didn't exist, until it reached what looked like an abandoned subway tunnel. But Putin's device revealed the truth: this wasn't abandoned at all. You won't believe what she had built beneath Beijing. The tunnel opened into a vast underground complex that made Putin recalculate everything he thought he knew about Chinese military capabilities. Command centers with real-time global surveillance, communication arrays that could reach any point on Earth, and weapons systems that looked at least 5 years ahead of anything he'd seen in Russia. "When you said you wanted to meet secretly," she said with the first genuine smile Putin had seen from him, "I assumed you'd appreciate some extra security." Matthews stared around the complex in amazement. "This is why they're accelerating Operation Clean Slate. They don't just want to eliminate you too, they're afraid of what you've built." Putin nodded slowly. He was beginning to understand that this wasn't just about preventing an American attack. This was about fundamentally reshaping global power. But the Americans weren't done surprising them. Xi's communication systems suddenly blazed to life with incoming priority signals. Not from Chinese intelligence, from inside the American operation itself. "That's impossible," Matthews said, staring at the displays. "Those are classified Pentagon communication channels." Xi's expression hardened. "James, you weren't the only American who decided to switch sides." The main display screen activated, and a familiar face appeared. Sarah Chen, former CIA deputy director, now speaking to them from what looked like a secure location inside the United States. Vladimir, she said without preamble. Matthews told you about Operation Clean Slate, but he didn't tell you everything. The people behind this aren't just planning to attack you. They're planning to eliminate anyone in the American government who might oppose them. Putin leaned forward. Including you? Including me. Including Matthews. Including anyone who believes in the Constitution over corporate interests. And that's when Putin realized the real scope of what they were facing. This wasn't America versus Russia and China. This was a shadow network trying to seize control of all three superpowers simultaneously. How many others? She asked. Enough, Chen replied. Military officers who took their oath seriously, intelligence agents who still believe in serving their country rather than their bank accounts, politicians who remember what public service actually means. Putin's device chimed with an urgent alert. The drones found the building, he announced. Direct hit. Officially, we're all dead. Matthews smiled grimly. Good. Now we can really get to work. What happened next changed everything. Chen's image was joined by others: General Patricia Morrison, former chairman of the Joint Chiefs, Director David Kim from the NSA, Senator Rebecca Walsh from the Intelligence Committee. All of them speaking from secure locations, all of them confirming the same thing. Operation Clean Slate had forced America's own defense establishment to choose sides. The attack begins in 6 hours, Chen reported. But we've managed to compromise some of their systems. The question is, are you ready to coordinate a response? Putin and Xi exchanged glances. They had come into this meeting as rivals. Now they were being asked to lead a global resistance movement that included Americans fighting their own government. What do you need from us? Putin asked. Everything, Chen replied. Your intelligence networks, your military assets, your political influence. And something else. What else? We need you to do something that will make the whole world watch. Something so dramatic that every intelligence agency, every military commander, every political leader on Earth will have to choose a side. But what she proposed next was completely insane. We surrender, she said quietly. The secure communication channel fell silent. Even Putin stared at him like he'd lost his mind. Not to the Americans, she continued. To each other. Publicly. We call a joint press conference, announce that China and Russia are forming a permanent alliance, and invite every other nation to choose, join the alliance or face the consequences of American global domination alone. Matthews shook his head. That's suicide. The moment you go public, Clean Slate will target you directly. Let them try, Putin said, understanding dawning in his eyes. She is right. If we force this into the open, the shadow network loses its greatest advantage. Chen's voice crackled through the speakers. The American people don't know what's being done in their name. If you can show them what their government is really planning. Revolution, Putin finished. Not just in America, but everywhere. They had 4 hours to organize the impossible. The underground complex transformed into a war room unlike anything the world had ever seen. Chinese hackers worked alongside Russian intelligence officers. American defectors coordinated with European contacts who had been quietly watching the situation develop. Putin stood at the center of it all, his device now connected to communication networks spanning 6 continents. For the first time in his political career, he wasn't just thinking about Russian interests. He was thinking about human survival. The press conference will be in Moscow, he announced. Red Square. Maximum visibility. Too dangerous, Matthews protested. They'll have satellite weapons trained on that location within minutes. Putin's smile was cold and confident. Let them try. They'll learn what happens when they threaten Russia on Russian soil. But none of them expected what happened when Putin made the call to Moscow. His secure line to the Kremlin went through immediately, but the voice that answered wasn't his usual contact. It was Defense Minister Alexei Komarov, speaking in code that Putin recognized as an emergency protocol. "Sir, we've been expecting your call. Operation Fortress is active." Putin's blood chilled. Operation Fortress was a protocol he'd established years ago but hoped never to use. It meant the Kremlin was under siege. "Status report," Putin demanded. "American special forces attempted to infiltrate the Kremlin 40 minutes ago. We repelled them, but sir, they weren't trying to capture anything. They were trying to plant something." Putin's jaw clenched. "Nuclear?" "No, sir. Something else. Something that would have made it look like you ordered a nuclear strike on Beijing." The implications hit everyone in the underground complex simultaneously. Operation Clean Slate wasn't just about military dominance, it was about making Putin and Xi destroy each other. And that's when she revealed his final card. "Vladimir," she said quietly, "there's something else I haven't told you. The weapon systems I showed you earlier, we didn't just acquire the specifications. We built them." Putin turned slowly. "Built what?" "Everything. The satellite networks, the hypersonic missiles, the electronic warfare capabilities. We've been preparing for this war for 3 years." The underground complex suddenly made sense. This wasn't just a command center, it was the heart of a military operation that had been planned as carefully as any chess game. "Why didn't you tell me earlier?" Putin asked. Xi's expression was grave. "Because I needed to know you were really committed to stopping them. What I'm about to propose, there's no going back from this." What she proposed next made Putin question everything he thought he knew about warfare. "We don't just form an alliance," she said. "We demonstrate what that alliance can do. In real time. On live television. We show the world that American military superiority is an illusion." He activated a display that showed real-time positions of American military assets around the globe. Aircraft carriers, nuclear submarines, satellite networks, missile defense systems. "We disable them," she continued. "All of them. Simultaneously. Without firing a single shot." Putin studied the display, his strategic mind racing through the implications. Electronic warfare? Beyond electronic warfare. We've developed technology that can literally turn their own weapons against them. Make their missiles target their own ships, their satellites broadcast our message instead of their communications. Matthews looked stunned. "That's impossible. Our systems have redundant security." Xi's smile was quiet and deadly. "Your systems were designed by humans. And humans make mistakes." 2 hours until the press conference. 1 hour until Operation Clean Slate began. Putin made the decision that would either save the world or end it. "Do it," he said. She nodded and began entering commands into the central control system. Around the complex, technicians and analysts prepared for the most audacious military operation in human history. "Sarah," Putin called to the American CIA contact. "Are your people ready?" Chen's voice was steady despite the chaos. "Ready. The moment you demonstrate that American military power is compromised, we'll begin arrests of clean slate leadership." "And if we fail?" "Then we all die as heroes instead of living as slaves." But as the final countdown began, none of them noticed the figure watching from the shadows. In a corner of the complex where the surveillance cameras had a blind spot, someone had been observing everything. Someone who had access to the facility, who knew the security protocols, who could move around without triggering alarms. Someone who had been reporting back to Washington the entire time. As Putin and Xi prepared to change the world, their greatest enemy was standing right behind them. And in 60 seconds, that enemy was going to strike. The countdown reached 0. Xi's finger hovered over the final activation key. Putin stood beside him, ready to broadcast their message to the world. "Now," Putin said. She pressed the key. And every screen in the complex went dark. In the sudden silence, a slow clap echoed through the command center. Putin and Xi spun toward the sound, their hands moving toward concealed weapons. A figure stepped out of the shadows, and Putin's blood turned to ice. It was Dmitry Volkov, his most trusted advisor for 15 years. The man he had treated like a son. The man who knew every one of Putin's secrets, every one of his fears, every one of his plans. "Hello, Vladimir," Volkov said in English, his Russian accent completely gone. "I believe you've been looking for the person behind Operation Clean Slate." The betrayal was absolute. And the timer was still counting down. She reached for his emergency protocols, but Volkov was faster. The Chinese leader collapsed, a tranquilizer dart in his neck. Matthews tried to run, but more figures emerged from the shadows. American special forces who had been hiding in the complex the entire time. Putin stood alone in the center of his greatest failure, surrounded by the very people he had spent his entire life trying to defeat. Volkov walked closer, his face showing no emotion. "You should have stayed retired, old man. You should have enjoyed your golden years instead of trying to save a world that doesn't want to be saved." Putin's voice was steady despite everything. "How long?" 20 years, Volkov replied. "Since before you became president. Every decision you made, every strategy you developed, every move you thought was your own, all of it guided by us." But Putin had one final surprise that even Volkov hadn't anticipated. Putin smiled. It was a cold, calculating expression that Volkov had never seen before. "Dmitry," Putin said quietly, "did you really think I survived 40 years in intelligence by trusting anyone completely?" Putin pressed a hidden button on his device. Nothing happened for a moment. Then, every screen in the complex blazed back to life. But instead of showing Chinese military systems, they were showing something that made Volkov's face turn white with terror. Live footage from inside American military command centers. Real-time conversations between Clean Slate leadership. Bank records, communication logs, assassination orders, everything. And it was broadcasting live to every television network, every internet platform, every communication system on Earth. "You see, Dmitry," Putin continued, his voice deadly calm, "the thing about being paranoid is that sometimes you're right. I've been recording everything for 20 years. Every conversation, every meeting, every secret you thought was safe. The world was watching. And what they saw changed everything forever." On screens across the globe, people witnessed the truth about Operation Clean Slate. They saw American military leaders planning to eliminate foreign heads of state. They saw corporate executives calculating the profit margins of global war. They saw politicians discussing population control like it was a budget meeting. But most importantly, they saw the evidence that this conspiracy included people from every major government on Earth. Volkov raised his weapon, but Putin was no longer afraid. "Too late, old friend," Putin said. "The revolution has already begun." In Washington, Sarah Chen and her allies were moving. In Moscow, loyal Russian forces were securing the Kremlin. In Beijing, Chinese military commanders were taking control of their own government. And around the world, ordinary people were taking to the streets, demanding answers. Volkov pulled the trigger. But the revolution was bulletproof. The shot echoed through the complex, but Putin remained standing. Volkov stared in confusion at his weapon, then at the spreading smile on Putin's face. "Blanks," Putin explained. "I switched your ammunition 3 hours ago. Did you really think I wouldn't notice when my oldest friend suddenly developed perfect American English?" She stirred from his collapse. The tranquilizer had been faked too. Matthews revealed himself to be wearing body armor. Even the American Special Forces turned out to be Chinese and Russian operatives in disguise. The entire scene had been theater. A performance designed to get Volkov to reveal himself and provide the final evidence needed to expose Operation Clean Slate completely. But the real shock was still coming. As Volkov was secured and the truth continued broadcasting worldwide, Putin received a call on his secure device. The caller ID made him pause. It was the President of the United States. Putin answered. "Mr. President." "Mr. Putin," came the reply, and the voice was shaking. "I need you to know. I had no idea. Operation Clean Slate was being run without my knowledge. They were planning to eliminate me too. Putin glanced at Xi, who was listening through the speaker. What do you propose, Mr. President? I propose we work together to clean house. All of us. Every government, every military, every intelligence agency. We expose everyone involved in this conspiracy and we make sure it never happens again. And that's how 3 former enemies became the founders of a new world order. 6 months later, Putin stood once again in Red Square. But this time, he wasn't alone. Xi Jinping stood to his right, the American president to his left. Behind them, leaders from dozens of countries that had chosen cooperation over conspiracy. The crowd wasn't just Russian, it was international. People who had traveled from around the world to witness the signing of the Global Transparency Accords, a treaty that would forever change how nations related to each other. The age of shadow networks is over, Putin announced to the crowd and to the billions watching worldwide. The age of open cooperation begins now. She stepped forward. We learned that our greatest enemy was never each other. Our greatest enemy was secrecy itself. The American president nodded. From this day forward, all military operations, all intelligence activities, all diplomatic negotiations will be subject to international oversight. No more hidden agendas. No more secret wars. But Putin's final words were the ones that changed everything. We discovered that the world's most powerful weapon isn't nuclear missiles or satellite networks, Putin said, his voice carrying across Red Square and around the globe. The world's most powerful weapon is truth. And truth, once released, can never be contained again. As the crowd erupted in celebration, Putin reflected on the journey that had brought him here. From a secret meeting in Beijing to a global revolution, from bitter enemies to unlikely allies. The conspiracy that had tried to control the world had instead united it. And somewhere in a prison cell, Dmitry Volkov watched the ceremony on television, finally understanding that he had helped create the very thing he had tried to prevent. The world had chosen transparency over tyranny. And there was no going back.